morning, folks. My name is Joseph Miller. I'm a police officer from Daytona Beach Police Department. I've recently just served a term with the DEA in Orlando, Florida as a task force agent. As a task force agent, I've come across a case, and this is something I've been working for several years, with synthetic drugs, and namely some of the stuff that you see right here. K2, spice, potpourri, bath salts, the purple drink, as you see in the bottom corner, which is just a mix of prescription cough syrup or the DMs or the Tussins and whatnot. Molly, new synthetic drug that has been around for a couple years, but it's changing and changing and changing and evolving. And it's something as law enforcement we're trying to keep up with. We're behind the 8 ball quite a bit, and I'm going to discuss some of the things that are trends, new things that we're seeing on the street, and things that we're trying to do to defeat what's going on out there. Again, my name is Joseph Miller. If you guys have questions, this is my cell phone number, and this is my email. It's millerj@dbpd.us. K2, as it's known on the streets, or spice, any of these, were actually being developed for true medical use. Analgesics and whatnot. Started in Israel. In the U.S., they were doing it also. John William Huff out of Clemson was one of the leading developers. And he, at one point, in one of his publications said, I'm stopping right here because we found that everything we're looking for in these chemicals and in these drugs is everything that we don't want. He's getting the psychoactive results out of it, and what he was looking for is just simply analgesics, painkillers, any and all of the stuff that would help you guys in the medical profession. They found that he made a nasty, nasty drug. 100 times and even later 1,000 times stronger than what the THC levels of marijuana were. As the chemists synthesized and changed things, the foundation of the molecule obviously was the same. What they were trying to do is disguise the drug, and these are the guys that we were looking for. They would keep the footprint or the foundation of the molecule the same, change it, pass it on, and that would defeat the tests, and that would defeat the legislation that the U.S. and the states had here that were banning these drugs. John William Huffman made JWH-018. That was what he found to be the strongest of all of the cannabimetic agents, and that's what was the benchmark that all the producers and chemicals and biotech people in China and throughout the world were trying to replicate. They changed it to AM-2201. From AM-2201, they went to a chemical called UR-144, and then to XLR-144, PB22, and 5-FPB22. What they were doing was just changing the molecule, manipulating it in the 1 and 3 position, excuse me, and passing it forward. That would defeat any of the tests that law enforcement has on the street to identify the chemical. It would get the same pharmacological effect that was desired by the drug user, and it would defeat the legislation that we had at the time. The defense attorneys harp on the fact that these changes in the 1 and 3 position are changing the molecule and making it structurally unsimilar to the original molecule, thus defeating the Federal Analog Act and the Analog Acts that we have at a state level. The unregulated chemical companies, for the most part, are coming out of China. They disguise their packaging and they disguise their drugs, calling it black color, black powder, laundry detergent. They send it over as different types of acids and cleaners, and it's shipped in. It comes through U.S. Customs. Nobody thinks twice about it. Gets into the hands of the manufacturer. The manufacturer is getting each of these bags of laundry detergent for $1,100 to $5,000 per kilogram. each of those kilograms yields 20 to 30 kilograms of actual drug that hits the street at $10 to $30 per gram. So for every one of these bags, these guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, money being the motivator behind all this. In 2012, at the G20 conference in New York, at the time, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton cited the cases that we had here in Orlando, Florida, showing the Chinese delegation what we had and asking for them to tighten up on their regulations of chemicals coming out of their companies and also out of their biotech firms and companies over there. It didn't really go anywhere as far as we can see on the streets. What we've noticed on the street, and what these numbers actually came from you at the time, and this is in regard to the bath salts and the synthetic cannabinoids. As the use of bath salts came down, the synthetic cannabinoids went up. The cannabinoids were made to replicate even the same psychoactive effects of the bath salts, so there wasn't any use for the bath salts. Those were all red flagged, and they were being pursued by law enforcement because of the dangers, obviously. And it was easy to find bath salts. They were sold as different types of powders, snorted. It was very, very identifiable. The synthetic cannabinoids were a little more difficult to identify as a drug, mainly because of their marketing and the tactics and how they were selling it. Seizures increased, obviously, and interestingly, in Colorado, the number of overdoses for synthetic cannabinoids increased tenfold at the same time that they legalized marijuana. Why that happened, we're unsure, it's unclear, but basically this was cheaper, more readily available, and much stronger than the marijuanas that were being sold, or still being sold right over the counter. Domestically, what we're having to battle and fight are these trade shows that make available these chemicals. They provide marketing tactics and techniques and basically open it up to the entire world on how to create, mask, design, market, manufacture, and move all your chemicals and drugs throughout the country. This was the CHAMPS trade show where in an undercover operation I went out representing a smoke shop and I actually won Best Smoke Shop at the trade show. So I think we did okay there. At this trade show, which was in Las Vegas, this is what got us 2 years, at least 2 years ahead of the game in identifying the drugs that were going to be hitting the street now and the drugs that are hitting the street in the next couple months and year to come. It was absolutely amazing walking through the trade show at the Las Vegas Convention Center, which was, they had the entire convention center. If anybody's been out there for anything, you've seen it, and it's enormous. The enormity just blew my mind of how many vendors were there. We would walk through, and I would get samples of different illicit pharmaceutical and black market pharmaceutical drugs, synthetic cocaine, synthetic heroin, synthetic opium that was made from a very, very concentrated kratom, the synthetic marijuanas, liquid marijuana, liquid THC. All this was just handed right over as I walked through and explained what I was doing with my smoke shop and some of the things I wanted to do to change the market. And you know, it went quite well, went very well. Trade shows also had smoking devices, pipes. They were making all their bongs and pipes there. Although they tell you, hey, none of this stuff is for smoking or ingestion, but you know, here's a place where you can get syringes, here's glass pipes, here's the little glass pipes with the roses in them that have a port right there for smoking crack or smoking any number of things now these days with the synthetic drugs. But this is all what was going on at the trade show. as I said, our difficulty identifying the compounds is that the U.S. government finds that they want to disclose months and months and months and even years ahead of time that we are going to ban this substance A, B, and C. So the manufacturers and the biotech companies throughout the world get those chemicals A, B, and C, and they start to manipulate them, test them, a lot of times testing them on themselves, and they have little dummies that they actually use. The manufacturers here in the States take packaging persons that they hire for anywhere from $3 to $5 an hour, and they provide them free drugs and pay them $3 to $5 an hour to package the drugs. They're then asking and getting reports on how these new chemicals and the manipulated chemicals are affecting them, and if they're as good or better than the previous chemicals. There's not a lot of science involved in the manufacturers and here in the States, but there is a ton of science involved, and actually very, very good reputable chemists in the biotech companies in China and Europe that are manipulating these knowingly and willingly to be sold and further manufactured into a drug that's going to hit the streets. Something that was difficult for law enforcement was we didn't have a standard. We didn't have anything to say, hey, chemical A, B, and C right here is what we're looking at right here. One of the big laboratories that we hit in Daytona Beach and Ormond Beach was a laboratory that really opened the floodgates for us in law enforcement to identify what these kids actually used. And it was a standard that was sent to special testing in DC and Virginia that later moved forward with the legislation through Congress and said, okay, we're going to start to identify this strand of drug. And it's been great since. However, as I said, they regulate the drug well after they say we're going to regulate it. So they disclose to the world what's going to happen, and by the time they regulate it, it's been out of use and out of service for months and months and months. The laboratories, which we call them laboratories, but the areas that they manufacture and they bring in the chemicals, they start to mix the chemicals and they package. This was a laboratory in Ormond Beach, Florida. There were 17 persons packaging in the laboratory at the time of our takedown. Of the 17, 15 of the people were illegals. The only 2 people working in the laboratory that were legal U.S. citizens were the 8-year-old and 11-year-old that were born to the Hungarians that were here working in the laboratory, working with hundreds and hundreds of gallons of acetone, different chemicals, corrosive chemicals, packaging and machinery that was could very simply remove fingers, limbs, and whatnot, let alone the chemical hazards there within. The biotech companies that we found representing the manufacturer are offering a service to provide a toxicology of the chemical that they're selling in retail. This particular Life is Good synthetic cannabinoid contained UR144, controlled substance. The controlled substance in this report, which is called a contains report, is later shown in the same test, and if we could zoom in, UR144 over here is not detected. This is the test that this biotech company would provide to the retailer to take and show and display when he sells his goods. Now, law enforcement not having a standard to identify this chemical, but knowing that these chemicals are illegal, only have this test that identifies what is or isn't there to determine whether or not they're going to move on, arrest, open an investigation, or do whatever with the investigation that they currently have. This biotech company in Virginia held U.S. contracts, held CIA contracts, had FBI contracts, and did contracts with the DEA. This was a multi-million-dollar biotech firm that was charging several $100s per test and had several thousand clients throughout the country, and actually had a booth at the Champs Trade Show where I was at. Strom Thurmond in '86 came across things with methamphetamines and amphetamines, and the Federal Analog Act was adopted. The Federal Analog Act actually had two different types of verbiage. Between Senate and Congress, they bounced it around back and forth, and were discussing whether or not the three prongs, which are chemical structure being similar, the pharmacological effect, and the marketing, or implied use and implied pharmacological effect, are the three prongs that they determined would identify these chemicals. Well, the amphetamines and methamphetamines were just evolving. It was a small change in the molecular structure, as we see with the other synthetic drugs, to include the cannabinoids. You have to have prong one, and then either one of the next two. So in U.S. law, we came to the table with all of these cases from the big laboratories that we took down in Daytona and Ormond Beach, and we put on the table what we had, and all of the chemists, to include university chemists, doctors, PhD and master's degree chemists, came to the table for us to fight and say, hey, these are structurally similar because of the footprint. The foundation of the chemical is the same. The CB1, CB2 receptors of the brain are receiving this. The ball is hitting the glove, for all intents and purposes, with these chemicals. The difficulty then was fighting a slew of chemists who came in and said, no, they're different because that aromatic ring there, that's just, a little change, so no, it's not the same footprint. Very, very difficult fight. Luckily, we won that fight, and it's helped us move forward, but it was almost a 2-year battle to get past that, which got us 2 years behind. The analogs are in everything. My introduction to drugs, and I think why I became such a good drug agent, was my previous career. In '99, I wrote for the U.S. Postal Service as a cyclist, and then raced overseas for a lot of years and saw every different imaginable drug, performance-enhancing drug, and the manipulation of the same to defeat all of the tests. Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco, Barry Bonds, Marion Jones, all of them used different synthetic drugs and a synthetic testosterone manufactured by this man down here, Patrick Arnold. Patrick Arnold's been somebody I've reached out to and spoken to several times. Great guy, knows what he's doing is everything to defeat the U.S. government and law, but a brilliant, brilliant scientist. And he says, this is what I'm going to do because I know the government's going to fail in prosecution. I'm manipulating this molecule. I'm making this testosterone that the government's never going to see, the government's never going to move forward for or with. That was my introduction, and that was what got me into, I guess, the mindset of drugs, was being surrounded by it in my old profession with that guy. The physical identifiers, and mostly for fire department, EMTs, paramedics that are here, what you're going to see and notice in any and all of these synthetic drug labs, to include your bath salt labs, your K2, and even, as I'll get into later, some of the e-cigarette laboratories, are these foreign post declarations, your acetone, tons and tons of packaging of stuff going in and out of the country and all around the country. They don't keep track of their finances very well. They deal a lot of cash, and what we've discovered through our financial investigation of the people doing this is they just use MoneyGrams, bulk cash transfers, or they give you a bank account and say deposit this much cash into this account in Texas, the same account is withdrawn out of the next day in Florida. Millions and millions of dollars per day and per week moving in that manner. Again, the illegal employees, there's a lot of human trafficking related to the drugs that they're manufacturing. Some of the Russians and Hungarians we came across in Ormond and Daytona Beach were actually being held in motel rooms. Their passports, their telephones, everything were taken from them. They were driven to and from the work. They were paid $4 to $5 an hour to work for 10 to 16 hours a day, and they were given their hotel room. They would be delivered to banks with their passports, their IDs, and forced to make cash deposits into different accounts that were in their names for individuals that ran the laboratories. And their IDs and passports and cell phones were then taken back from them when they exited. They were taken back to the motel with enough money to eat, a place to stay, and they were picked up the next day and driven to the laboratory. So all of this stuff is just something that law enforcement, fire, EMT, you guys may come across and see, and it's just disgusting. Our laboratories, there's the Mr. Proud, Elon Fedita, the first convicted for the synthetic drugs and the cannabinoids and the new modern day bath salts, right there. That's his. He had one of his workers take that picture, and he was sending that to his brother, who was a chemical supplier out of South Florida. From our first lab, this was obtained during a trash pull while we were doing our investigation. We went in to see what we were going to find, and that trash pull led us to the search warrant on that large location, which is where we had the 17 illegals working. The bath salts and cannabinoids, when they come in that raw powder form, are manipulated, they're cut, they're mixed with acetone. Acetone because it dries off 100%. And it's mixed in these jars, which just kind of hang out. It's for the synthetic cannabinoids. That jar is then poured directly into one of these pressure pot sprayers, the same thing you use to spray weeds in your yard. They take and they dump out a bunch of green leafy substance, Damiana leaf. And the Damiana leaf is spread out on the floor of a warehouse, concrete floor. They walk around and they spray it with a garden sprayer. They kick it around to mix it up. They rake it up in a pile. They put it into a plastic trash can, and then they scoop it out and put it into the nice little packages that you see outside as you came in. Not a lot of quality control in that. And where we find the overdoses is if anybody here's ever sprayed a chemical out of those pressure pot sprayers, you know that when your pressure's low or when you get a chunk or clump of chemical, it spits it right out. So that big chunk of chemical lands onto a little piece of green leafy substance, is packaged into a bag, and now that one hit from that one synthetic cannabinoid joint is equivalent to 1,000 marijuana cigarettes, and the person falls out. Not to mention the chemical itself has all the psychoactive properties of amphetamines and a litany of other drugs. So the patient immediately goes into overdose. These are the people that we had in Miami eating the faces off of transients, running around naked. Their core body temperature goes through the roof. And this is what's going to end up here in your hospital and somebody that you're probably going to deal with, Dr. Mueller. Again, more pictures of our laboratories. After it's sprayed, after it's put in the trash cans, they put it into these tins and they dry it out. That's the process. Once it's dried, it's packaged. This is the raw chemical that we located in the laboratory, pre-mixing of the acetone. Up top are packaged goods. The bottles of booze, we found bottles of booze in every one of the laboratories we went to, and they just had these, putting them on the table, letting the help get hammered to forget about $4 an hour. And they used it as spacers, they used them as bookends. It was ridiculous what was going on. On the top right is a laboratory that we got out of a 1950s post office. It was a retired post office in Daytona Beach. From the laboratory, we seized over 40,000 pounds of synthetic drugs. We filled 2 of those dumpsters with drugs and later paraphernalia. 40,000 pounds at $10 to $30 a gram. The guy was doing okay. More of the laboratory. This is one of the packaging and sealing machines that in one of the laboratories, the 8 and 11-year-old were using. It's heat sealing. It's got a little conveyor. The shield that blocks things like fingers and other pieces from getting stuck in it was removed for efficiency of cleaning it out from all the garbage that was getting stuck and falling behind it. So it was just a little kid throwing their hands and fingers right past that. One of our Hungarians packaging here, smoking cigarettes at the same time, drinking booze, trying to forget about the American dream, I guess. Overdose, what we've seen on the road in law enforcement and what some of the fire departments and hospitals have reported are the high core temperature, rapid heart rate, respiratory rate, the psychotic rage, suicidal thoughts and actions, respiratory distress, unconsciousness, coma, and death. From synthetic cannabinoids, we came back to mollies. We went from bath salts to the synthetic marijuana brands, and Molly came in. Everybody's heard about Molly. It's all over MTV. It is a party drug. Has a bunch of different and unusual ways to be ingested. This is the color, and this is what you'll see as a first responder, and you may find this in patients or in the pockets of patients. But they're homemade capsules. They're the capsules you can get off of Amazon.com. They mix it up, they package it. They pay anywhere from $1,100 to $5,000 per kilogram for this, and that can yield, if the person's bringing it in and selling it themselves, as our UCF students were here, $100,000 to $120,000 per kilogram. Initially, in the first strands of Molly, that molecule coming in, they said was the purest form of MDMA that the streets had seen. It was, and then it was manipulated, and now it's something else. 2 months ago, it was something even different, and in 2 more weeks, it's going to be even another different molecule and compound. The delivery methods: snorting, pills, pressed pills, capsules, injection, oral ingestion, liquid mixtures that are dropped just like acid was back in the day, smoking, and person-to-person transference. Anybody got an idea what this is? This is something we came across at the big rave concert that was down at the Citrus Bowl. This is when kids apply the Molly to their genitals, and the other person ingests it orally. Not a good idea. Not knowing how that chemical is manipulated and the chemicals that it's manipulated with prior to being sent out to the streets and given to you. Okay, the next one is e-cigarettes. And if anybody has questions during this, hold on to them. We'll get to them at the end because I've got just 12 hours of stuff to throw out in this hour. The electronic cigarettes. Anybody here using them to try to quit smoking? Electronic hookahs? Okay. You're going to love this if you are using that stuff. The thick pins, and they're calling them clearomizers. And the hookahs, atomizers. A lot of science behind all this. Okay. Your hookahs and your little packages with your e-cigarette that you get at the gas station for $9 to $15. And as you suck in and draw in, it causes the chemical to burn and vaporize, and then you smoke the vapor. More popular, and becoming more popular because of the cost, are the reusable e-cigarettes and the e-hookahs. And what they do with these guys is add this. This is liquid incense. This is the old K2 that we came across in the first chapter of this presentation. So the synthetic cannabinoids that we could easily identify now because of all the packaging and marketing and whatnot are put right here. These are manufactured by the same guy who was spreading out all that green leafy crap on the floor of his warehouse and shoveling it all into a bucket. This is where he's at now. This is the same guy, making tons of money again, and he's one step ahead of the government regulation, and FDA doesn't regulate these. Nobody's doing anything about this stuff right now. This is the warehouse that he has. That's the first step, is find a sterile environment to begin to manufacture your e-cigarettes. Import all your boxes from China. Import all your liquids from China, your powders from China, and your flavoring to make your nice strawberry or watermelon, in this case, electric hookah. Then you get your paperwork that says, hey, this is all okay, we promise, from China. It's good to go. And your tobacco flavor and neutral flavor. And then you're going to get your scientific apparatus, your turkey baster, your 12-volt diesel transfer pump, and a huge jug of chemical, which they're using a glycerin, they're using a vegetable type oil, an oil that will not burn and doesn't have a flash point or anything like that, where these electronic cigarettes will blow up in your hand. And then you get this guy mixing it up in the floor of that sterile laboratory and pour it into these buckets, which he rinses out with a hose prior to filling them. And then you got your e-cigarette. So there it is. The e-hookahs and these e-cigarettes down here are the guys like this that you can refill and you can put whatever you want into them. The commercial blue e-cigarettes and others, I would not for a minute suspect that they would put a synthetic drug or anything like that in there. However, because of these guys, it makes it difficult for us to go after these guys. There's no regulation on those guys. And they've got big tobacco behind them. Because big tobacco is behind them and moving forward with all the legislation and all the court and all the red tape, these guys, my guys that are hanging out in a warehouse mixing stuff up with turkey basters, are protected. So blue is ultimately protecting the guy in Ormond Beach who's hanging out in a warehouse, making a lot more money than blue per electronic cigarette. Mr. Nice Guy and his e-juice. Mr. Nice Guy is one of our original synthetic cannabinoids, Relaxinol. Okay, Mr. Nice Guy is here out of Florida. He jumped on the bandwagon really quick and got his little electronic cigarette and electronic hookah, his atomizer and clearomizer, and mixed up his juice, and he sells it as e-juice. So the e-juice out there is similar to Bizarro. Bizarro you saw on your way in on one of the synthetic cannabinoid packages. And now it's one more thing for law enforcement to look at and walk right by. Not many people look at these little bottles and think that there's something illicit in there, or think twice about it when they see it at the gas station. However, this less than 5 milliliters is $50. Goes a long way. Okay, my next step, and something that we've seen a resurgence, is the purple drink out of Texas. It's something law enforcement and FD and EVAC will come across at house parties. In Daytona Beach, we're starting to get some of the kids from Europe have come in, and some kids from the Caribbean have come in from high schools and colleges and whatnot. And we've already started to see it this year, very, very early spring break. Maybe it's called their winter break, but we did come across some of this. And here it is. It's just your codeines, your PMs, your DMs, mixed with candy, mixed with Sprite, mixed with any variety of different sodas, usually carbonated, and then they drink it. Scissor, lean, drank, purple jelly, Texas tea, all these are things you'll see. The rap community was really big. Lil Wayne, if anybody's heard of him, had one of his buddies, Little Flip, I think, overdosed on it. And in his videos, he sends out props to that guy who had passed away. That's one of his videos from MTV. This goes beyond the regular kids. This is in the NFL. These guys were using team doctors to prescribe their codeines. They were mailing their codeines throughout the country to go to the next city that they were going to play football in, so it would be there and ready, and somebody would mix it up and have it ready for the big party after their game in whatever city they were going to. This young man died. Baltimore Ravens football star died after a crash in Texas after just getting hammered on purple drink. And there it is. It's just a quick mix. It's a quick high. It's a heavy buzz. And the kids that are using this seem very, very, very heavily intoxicated. But there's no other indications of alcohol. You won't smell alcohol in their breath. They'll slur their speech. They'll fall over. They go into states of unconsciousness. And a lot of times, what we've seen with the overdoses throughout the country is the kid's just thrown in the corner and they say, hey, he's just had too much to drink. Well, really, it wasn't too much to drink. It was this stuff. Now he goes into respiratory distress, failure, and he's out. And that's where we lose the kids in regards to this. They think it's not alcohol. He can sleep it off, and done and over. Or side effects that EVAC will come across. Okay, our next one, the vapor and the huffing. It's back. Anybody see one of these before? It's not much of a use for it. It's just a little aluminum capsule. Really nothing crazy about it. But this is sold with this guy right here. And what I've seen lately around Daytona Beach, some of the pictures I have are from University of Florida, Gainesville, I believe. But this is Whippets from back in the day. So your souvenir stores and your places over on Beachside are selling these punch balloons to kids. These are $10. Who'd pay $10 to walk up and down Atlantic Avenue with one of these? Some people would. So this is what we're seeing. So we got these kids popping up now. Mr. Willie Nelson has an electronic nitrous oxide vaporizer. He's all over the internet with that. But it is the modern day this. Okay? You don't have to worry about the gold or silver paint all over your face. Now you just go down to the souvenir store. That if anybody's been in Daytona Beach in the last year, they see all these t-shirt shops owned by our guy, by the way, who had the first big laboratory that we took, the guy that took the selfie, owns 12 t-shirt shops over there that sells green lasers and live turtles and punch balloons. So from this, we've gone to this. This is Amazon.com yesterday. You can get a handful of these for just a few bucks. It's called a cracker or a Whip-It dispenser. I don't know what else you would dispense it to other than this or this. But what's great about Amazon is they can say, hey, most people who have bought this also buy this. Your punch balloons, there they are. And you can see your profit margin. 10 bucks a balloon? Heck, I'm in the wrong business. And here we go. Gainesville, Florida, folks. Big party. I'm not sure which fraternity this was at, but it was actually not on the fraternity property, but a neighboring house too, which I guess they used because they didn't want to lose their own house. But law enforcement didn't know what the heck was going on when they got there. They really didn't care. I figure if I was there, I'd say, oh, these kids are a little too old for balloons, but, you know, I guess not. Our friend Steve-O from MTV, all over the internet and YouTube, going to town with his nitrous oxide and doing what he does best. Again, marketed, sold as such. At the Champs Trade Show, when I was dealing with those guys in regards to these, they actually had these and they were selling them with a flavored gas. Some of the gases they'd flavor with different fruits and strawberries, and they'd promise stronger sexual performance with the use of this. And that was how they were marketing it, as sexy whip and every different thing imaginable. But what they found is when they sell, and this is how they defeated law enforcement regulations and the whole 9 yards, is to sell a box of these, which they would sell 10, 20, 100, 200 of them. They would also have to sell one whipped cream dispenser. So you get one whipped cream dispenser, you buy it, you walk out the store, you toss it, and you go and you crack open one of these. So that's how they were defeating it, and that was how they were marketing it to me. Hey, if you're going to go sell this stuff, for every box of this that you buy, you need to buy one whipped cream dispenser, and that's going to keep you clear with all the regulations throughout the state and the country, shipping, receiving, the whole 9 yards. What smoke shop, what tobacco store in the country, or what gas station is going to sell whipped cream dispensers? Additionally, and something I don't get into here, but why would any smoke shop need to sell your 5-hour energy type small vials with these different energy drinks, different pills that promise you to stay awake for 10, 12, 18 hours? Why do they need to sell that? Well, they're selling it because all these are just little manipulated drugs. A lot of the pills, the capsules, are synthetic cannabinoids. Some of the pills and capsules and kratom type products that you can buy, you just crack it open out of there, you mix it with the green leafy substance or regular tobacco that you'd buy at the tobacco store, and you got a party. It's ready to go. This is a result of, and this is something you guys may see, of huffing directly off of these guys. 2 different kids, a lot of swelling, a lot of miserable Facebook photos, but that's what you guys may see and come across. Additionally, the kids that take these crackers will pop that shut, open it up, start to crank it off. And if you've ever used any type of CO2 cartridge, you know that the top of this, if you don't have a little plastic barrier between this, freezes. Freeze your lips right to it. Is this what happened here? I'm not sure. I don't see any abrasions where they tore any skin off. But would I doubt that to be the case? No, I wouldn't. But you will see burns on people's hands and on their face from using these to manually ingest. Respiratory distress. It's almost immediate gland swelling in the kids that you saw. Apparently it was just spontaneous. The unconsciousness, the drunken behavior, and no sign of alcohol use. And that is me. That's all I've got right now. I zipped through that because I had so many things to talk about. But if anybody here has questions, I'd be happy to field them right now. Okay. Yes?
So those legitimate biotech companies that are doing chemical analysis for those things, is there any legal recourse to the fact that they're like knowingly involved with illicit?
Yeah, we've shut down a few. One of them was Triangle Research here in Florida, which was a big biotech firm. There were several that marketed themselves as biotech firms and chemical analysis companies. And really, they were just a dude in a garage with a printer, and he would just type up and say, hey, what do you want it to say? And I'll make it say that. AI Biotech, in my meeting with them at the Champs Trade Show, said, hey, we'll make these reports say whatever you want them to say, as long as you pay us on time. You can pay me cash, you can send it to my accounts, whatever you want to do, we'll make it say what you want it to say. Legal recourse against them? Yes. Not only did they lose several U.S. government accounts, which were probably their primary bank account, but they additionally are facing a lot of sanctions. They lost all of their DEA accreditation for having any type of controlled substance or manipulating such. So they really are likely bankrupt or about to be bankrupt. They're in litigation right now, but I would count on seeing them disappearing. Millions and millions of dollars were seized from that company, and the research side of that biotech firm, everybody from the top down was gone. So it will result, and it has resulted in multiple arrests and seizures, and there are more to come in that company. Yes, ma'am?
Has the banking industry been helpful or fruitful in this whole process of tracking drug money?
Yes, ma'am. We've been working with a lot of different banks, to include the Federal Reserve, but we've got, I'll call them friendlies at the banks that help us move through our government subpoenas and grand jury subpoenas in regards to these companies. And what we found is, as we identify one person and we go into their bank accounts, that spider webs out, and we've got 10 people now involved and related to these. So in just about every individual that we go to, through their bank accounts, we can establish an entire RICO case against the persons involved, either sending money, receiving money, or receiving money on the behalf of this guy, making a cash withdrawal and bringing it to him. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands and multi-millions of dollars of cash we've come across in people's closets. $2.7 million in a closet safe, just stacked up. No room for the other $750,000 that was in the bureau next to the bed. A lot of that was being packaged up into boxes and sent through U.S. Postal Service through Canada and disappeared from the country. Others was thrown into cars, into hidden compartments in cars and driven out of the country. Others was shuffled and scrambled around and laundered so much that it ended up making itself out of the country. We do have targets our investigation that were purchasing homes, houses, sports cars, opening jewelry stores, buying bulk diamonds and gold bullion, and stashing all their money in those assets. We've seized several of those assets, and we'll be seizing several more. But throughout the world and throughout the country, they're just taking that money and turning it into a hard asset that they can sit on. And then as time moves on, they just sell it off bit by bit, and now they've got clean money. So from the criminal end of the investigation, that's what we're finding.
Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you.